Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon again. We have almost 50 people already joined, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and whoever joins a little bit later, we'll catch them up. Very excited for everybody to be spending time with us. Today, we're going to be talking about AI, accounting, and accounting operations. Together with Karthik from Zora. So I'm Andrew from Klarity, Karthik from Zora. Karthik, do you want to go ahead and get started with your introduction?
Sure, Andrew. I think what a way to do a webinar. Great weather. I'm not sure how many of you are attending from Bay Area, but Karthik Ramamoorthy. I'm actually a SVP of product, run all of our finance and revenue solutions at Zora. Really excited to share kind of what we are seeing in the intersection of LLM, AI, how companies are adopting it. Obviously, we are at the cutting edge of delivering solutions, leveraging AI for our customers. So keen to share and learn in this session. Maybe before we kick off, I just wanted to, I think we say this very frequently these days. It's about, hey, accountants are not going to be replaced by AI. It's accountants that embrace AI or use it on a day-to-day basis that are going to replace people who don't, right? So I think we really want to see as much as possible what we want to share around what accountants are doing, what use cases are they applying AI into. That's the core of what we want to do today. And who better to chat with other than Andrew about it.
So thank you so much, Karthik. So I'm Andrew Antos. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Klarity. We're a San Francisco-based AI company. And we've been an AI company since 2017, which is 6 years too early, if you ask me. And basically what we've built is a system that can automate all kinds of repetitive processes dealing with unstructured data for accounting teams. We're working with companies like OpenAI, DoorDash, Cloudflare, many others. And we spent literally, since 2016, 2017, we spent all this time kind of thinking about what AI can do, what it cannot do, what is it uniquely good at, what is it okay at, and what is the interplay between human subject matter experts versus what are the right jobs to offload to AI that you don't have to do in the future. We started the company so people don't have to do these highly repetitive workflows. That's our entire purpose in the world. And so humans can be focusing on high value added creative accounting work rather than just processing one transaction after another until 2 a.m. in the morning. So that's why we're here. And I'm very excited to have this webinar with Karthik. And I think we have some pretty exciting topics lined up. And so, Karthik, do you want to set the stage a little bit in terms of what you're seeing in the market in terms of problems and problem statements?
Yeah, actually, before getting into real application or usage of AI, we want to share something around. We recently did a State of the Revenue Accounting report, published it. It's available online. What we did was we had about 500 plus finance and accounting senior resources interviewed as part of the process, trying to understand what is the current state of revenue accounting. And multiple themes came out of it. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to touch on a few that's probably more relevant to this session and context. I think what we were fundamentally learning is, hey, revenue accounting is no longer like a back office operations that's just crunching numbers for the company. It's actually become the front and center of business process operations, right? So, and with the rate of innovation that's happening, the macroeconomic conditions, the competition out there, companies and teams are actually asked to move fast and deliver outcomes quickly, right? And to catch up to that, businesses are evolving and companies are actually trying to launch new business offerings to customers. It could be bundling products together or launching subscriptions for companies who are not. And off late, the trend is around, hey, how do I monetize using consumption or usage-based monetization for their customers? So a lot of this is actually ensuring that it's no longer a static system that you set in the back office that's actually set up to automate your process. It's a very, very configurable ongoing application that you need to have to support all these ongoing changes in the system, right? So the revenue accountants or teams are are having to set up things that are ready to adopt to changing business models, right? This is one thing that kind of came continuously, that hey, there are a lot of changes in systems. How do we make sure, or changes in processes upstream, how do we make sure systems are able to adopt to them? And the next big thing is, I think the teams don't necessarily seem to have confidence on the quality of data. And I think data itself is a hot topic, but data in the revenue sense is very relevant, very, very important. So what is missing is, first of all, I think, do revenue accountants or even finance teams actually have access to the right data? And is it accurate? And not only is it accurate, is it actually able to give the completeness of information, right? So there's a lot of question when it comes to data, and people are trying to adopt to solve some of these problems, and most of these problems stem from upstream systems, if you look at it, right? Because in a code to revenue world, there are just multiple systems that we are integrating, and information is shared across all these applications, and most problems start off with, hey, what's captured upstream, the quality of the data, consistency of that information. So there is obviously solutions like Klarity, Zora, where we are at the crux of automating some of this code to cash processes. We are actually helping companies manage it, but at the forefront, I think the problems that this report published said was, hey, we want to be able to do this end to end and ensure there is a data consistency and integrity available, right? So we look through the session, we look at, hey, ways and means by which AI can help in doing some of this, and also we want to touch upon broader use cases outside of revenue accounting, like what do our customers see, where are they applying AI into? So before we go into all that, I think just assuming we are all a little early. Of course, it's been a year of generative AI journey, but I think let's hear more from you, Andrew, around, hey, what's generative AI, right? Fundamental, something that the teams can get up to speed on. Then we'll look at some of the use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, we're hearing exactly the same set of problem statements from our customers as well. If it's all about data. The good news is that AI is also all about data. And so in the last, let's call it like 16 months, what was really popularized is the word GenAI, generative AI, short for generative AI. And I don't love this term because I think it's a little bit misleading, because it implies AI that can only generate new things. But really what GenAI is the ability to both generate new things, like generate new language, generate an ASC 606 accounting memo, generate an email reply, generate an itinerary, what I'm going to do on my vacation. And so it can generate things. It can also generate images, for example, right? So if I say, I want a logo for a webinar that we're going to be doing together with Zora and so on, can you create a logo? It can generate things, generate new artifacts, either visual or language-based, or a combination of both. But what GenAI is actually extremely good at as well is the ability to understand existing artifacts. So to read a document or to read a piece of language and then say, okay, how do I respond to this? The key technology here is something called LLMs, large language models, as opposed to language models that were much smaller before. And what this technology enables to do is to, without having to train something, give it some context. And when I say some context, I can say, for example, I have a contract that has a termination for convenience without significant penalty for this amount of money with this customer and so on. Can you generate an accounting memo using the 5-step ASC 606 framework for me? And so I'm giving it context. I'm saying this is what the contract looks like. There's a TFC. There's a significant penalty, or there isn't one. Generate the memo for me. And so the key thing here is the fact that this technology is much simpler to use and much more kind of faster deployment than all AI that came before that. So that's kind of like one thing that I would say. The second thing is, if you think about a lot of these accounting workflows where AI can come in, is it can both understand the context automatically, right? So it can read the contract and say, hey, here's a termination for convenience, here's a significant penalty, and then it can draft the accounting memo. And so we're kind of moving to this world of a co-pilot for a lot of accounting teams. And to Karthik's earlier point, it's about, if you embrace this, it means that you're an accountant with superpowers. right? You're the accountant that can draft 20 memos in 1 hour instead of one memo in 20 hours. And so that's the really exciting thing about GenAI and what it can do. In terms of the actual impact, right? So the way I kind of think about AI, or the way I think the most powerful way for everybody, and this is not just for accounting, but for everybody to think about AI and what it's going to do to our professional lives, is the fact that we can suddenly all afford to have multiple different agents or multiple different assistants helping us with our life, right? And so what I specifically see here is the fact that even every individual contributor, let alone the chief accounting officer, and I'm sure we have a couple here, and the controllers and directors of revenue, even if you don't have a team, suddenly you have leverage because you have technology. You can be 10x more productive. And I think this is kind of like where we're going to start to see kind of two different worlds of folks who are really like excited about this and embrace this, learn how to use these tools, and become the 10x accountants compared to the folks who are much less interested in this. And given the audience here, I think everybody is very much in the first bucket. And so the number one benefit, I think, of course, is like an efficiency gain, right? Again, the 10xing here. I think the other side of this is that it allows us to spend more time on the things that humans are uniquely good at. I alluded to this fact that the reason why we started this company is because we feel that people shouldn't be spending time on highly repetitive kind of soul sucking tasks where you have at the end of quarter you need to review 200 contracts for 606 impact, or you're processing orders all day every day, or matching POs to CPQ data. And so what we see is like, if you can automate a lot of these things, and a lot of these things are not automated today because they're dealing with unstructured data. Contract can be negotiated, can be third-party paper. Historically, we didn't have the ability to automatically understand this data with computers until AI, and now specifically GenAI, came along, because now you can actually automate a lot of these unstructured data tasks. And so this allows us to spend more time on things that humans are better at and that are also more enjoyable. Kind of complex problem solving, new system implementations, thinking through complicated revenue scenarios, talking to sales teams why something cannot be done because we would never ever be able to recognize $1 of revenue for the next 5 years. I'm sure we've all been in those situations, and all of these different things that allow us to uniquely lean into the skills that humans are really good at, not just sitting behind a monitor processing orders. And then the last thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to tie it kind of, Karthik, to what you described at the beginning, which is AI is all about data, right? AI is about processing data, creating new data, understanding existing data. And the number one problem that we see folks dealing with is always like data completeness and data accuracy. Usually data accuracy comes in the form of something like order management, where it's like you just want to make sure that all the data that you have in your systems is correct. Data completeness is typically coming much more from the compliance, the 606, 842 angle, saying it's like, okay, do I have all the data that I need to make the right accounting decisions? And I think the really big impact that AI is going to have in this front is that a lot of the data cleanliness, a lot of the data accuracy, a lot of the data completeness can be automated for the first time, and can be automated in a co-pilot fashion, where if everything is okay, nobody needs to spend time on it. If there are any issues or potential issues, then a human gets alerted and says, hey, here's a potential issue. Can you dig into this and make sure that we treat it appropriately?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So what are the use cases?
I think let's getting into some interesting areas. So I think before even we get into use cases, I think if you look at, hey, what AI is good at doing and where we can start relying on it more, I just want to say it can automate and scale a lot of these tactical tasks and operations, right? I think you called out some of those, but it's really good at being able to do that. And by doing it, what it's doing is it's freeing up the people's time and bandwidth to work on some high value activities, right? And that's like maybe you're just focusing on some exceptions. You're now working on some insights or actionable items rather than just for doing the day-to-day tasks. And AI can do a lot of this in like a error-free, like it eliminates all the human errors or even data biases that's available that happens just unintentionally on a day-to-day when a human is doing this work. And AI can actually give you some prescriptive insights which you can action on, right? So this kind of the framework of where we can apply AI, and I think amongst all the industries and where it's most applicable, I think finance and accounting is an area, especially where we work with all this structured, unstructured data throughout. I think it's vastly impactful in applying into our use cases, right? So getting into use cases themselves, I think feel free to add because you're on the crux of things. But I think the use cases we are seeing, I think what our customers are starting to use these solutions for are categorized into various buckets. But I think the most impactful ones, I think if you start off with, it's around documents, right? I think all of us at companies, small and large, have a ton of documents that's available. This could be vendor agreements, customer agreements, memos or policy documents that you have, customer employment agreements, NDAs, any information that's actually now easy to extract, store it, search against it, and even do some workflows on top of it, which you can automate and understand, hey, if my contracts are expiring, notify some person, build a ton of workflows on top of these documented documents and the data that's now easy to analyze and search. And what we are seeing here is even we extending this document use cases around, hey, can I actually generate some financial statements or generate and analyze some of these SEC filings? I can take a 10K, 10Q and understand what was the summary, what is the narrative, and maybe you can even compare what your competition is doing if they already reported earlier. So depending on personas, different people in the organization, what kind of documents and data you have access to, there is just a ton of use cases we are seeing in practical applications with multiple companies solving for it. Klarity being the leader in solving some of these document use cases, that's getting widely adopted. And this is kind of very vastly better and more productive compared to anything you could have done, like Andrew said, 6 years before, right? The technology advancements has now made it far productive for end users.
Well, the technology was like you could solve the problems, but it would take like a year to get it off the ground because you have to have so much training data and so on. So it's just the ease of use of that technology was really hard. But I completely agree with you. I think it's like from like a very structural kind of like a 30,000 foot view perspective, the way to think about it is the interesting thing is internally, right, at companies, we all communicate through systems, right? I have a CPQ, I have a billing system, I have a revenue subledger, I have an ERP, and all the data is structured, and I have all these objects and so on, and they reflect the way I do business, right? So if like I'm selling hardware, I'm gonna see what I'm selling, what prices, what are the Incoterms, and all of these different things. If I'm selling software, I see my, this is a 3-year subscription, and and it's ramping, and I see all of that. And we can do that internally because we can all agree on the fact that like, okay, I have a system and the system is organizing how I do things. But that doesn't work externally, right? So it's like we communicate externally through documents, most then of course email and things like that, but formally around transactions, we communicate through documents. So we have contracts, we have order forms, we have purchase orders, we have invoices, we have delivery confirmations, we have bills of lading and whatnot. And the reason for that is because the only thing that we can use externally as a uniform language is language. And so that's why we're dealing with this kind of like unstructured nature. And most companies we see is like there's some kind of a converter. Usually it's a couple of teams, you're going to have somebody in procurement, you're going to have order management, you're going to have sales operations, revenue operations, you're going to have revenue accounting. And big chunks of the work that all of these teams are doing is like converting the unstructured data and documents into structured data in systems and ensuring the completeness and accuracy, right? A lot of our SAX controls are all about, is the data that I'm using to calculate my revenue the data that like actually is in the contract with the customer? And that all can actually be automated because AI can read the document, can structure the data out of the unstructured nature of the document, can match documents together. So you can have a package with a reseller agreement, an MSA, and an order form and a PO, can match, if everything is aligned across multiple documents. It can match data between a document and a system. And so all of these like kind of higher volume transactional workflows that have traditionally been offshored can now be automated. And so those are some, but then you have all the compliance use cases, like you pointed out, like drafting accounting memos. It's like we all spend so much of our lives doing that. And now you can get to a first draft in literally a minute. Not an hour, not 30 minutes. And so to me, that's very exciting.
I think to all the accountants who are still doing it manually, I think it saves significant amount of time, right? So it's what's possible now. So I want to touch upon some of these, I think, non-document use cases, right? Which if you look at it, going after some of the maybe accounts payable, account receivable, there's a ton of automation, but I think all of these automation solutions are now leveraging AI technologies a lot more extensively into doing bunch of things, right? These also involve some of the document workflows. Maybe they're just matching call it invoice to POs or receipts to payments. They can also do a ton of things around ensuring there's no fraud happening, there's no duplicate transactions. It's all of those things that they can do against this AP and AR workflows and get a lot more compliance in the background, and improve efficiency for end users. And you can extend on this to say, hey, you can also do a ton of reconciliations across systems, and all of us do reconciliations day in, day out, and a lot of that is now possible to automate and accuracy at scale for a lot of this. And reconciliation could be something just like you said, hey, I have so many different systems, data sitting across all these disparate systems. How do I ensure all of the source of truth is still accurate across my systems, and provide or bring human in the loop for exceptions, not having to do that manually every time, right? So most commonly, I think people do bank reconciliations, cash reconciliations, even transaction matching and reconciliations, which I think Klarity does some of that, right? So I think being able to do all of this, being able to rely on systems out of the box to do a lot of these reconciliations brings down a lot of time during your month end close or year end close that you do typically manually.
No, there's one super cool application for AI, and that is matching bill to, ship to addresses and company names, like reconciling all of that, right? Because there's like data entropy in that, and especially for tax purposes, you want to make sure is it the same entity, and is it the right address to use for tax calculation purposes? And because you can have the same address, right? This is what 101 Redwood Shores.
Same.
You can phrase it in so many different ways. It can say CA, California. It can have all of these changes. And AI is actually extremely good at figuring out yes, these two addresses are the same address despite being phrased very differently. And it's just it sounds like a really small thing, but we've seen companies that have a dedicated team just doing doing all of that fuzzy matching. And so there are all these small and big use cases lying around, but AI can help with most of them. I think what's really interesting is, and you brought up earlier as well, is kind of deciding what's a co-pilot versus what's a good autopilot use case. And it's not always obvious. What we generally found is, and for those of you maybe who are newer to AI, autopilot use case means you set up a system, AI is doing its job, and nobody's touching it, apart when it says, hey, here's a red flag, right? Or here's a problem, have a look at it. Copilot is much more like an assistive thing, right? Where it's not GPT is not automatically replying to your emails. What you do is you take, hey, I got this long email from an auditor. Can you please draft a polite reply to this email and use this information, right? That's a great co-pilot use case. It's making it more efficient, maybe even like better phrasing of some of the things. And for accounting specifically, one of the key things, of course, is accuracy, right? And it's like, how do you know if something is accurate or not? What we found, generally speaking, is if you have use cases where there's some kind of matching reconciliation happening, those can generally be autopilot use cases. Because what you can do is like, if I'm matching PO to CPQ data, for example, or billing system data, it's mathematically close to impossible to have an accidental match. It's much more common that you're going to have an accidental mismatch, and then you can clear it as a human, but you can't really see like an accidental match. It doesn't happen, and so you can actually have like a lot of trust in the fact that okay, I can set this up as an autopilot workload. Versus a lot of the compliance thing is like, okay, I need to have a look at this piece of language. Is it really an option? Do I need to create a material right or not? And kind of like considering that and documenting that, we find those to be really great at great use cases for Copilot.
Got it. That makes sense. I think what we have also seen, meaning in Zora, is something around, hey, how do we actually leverage AI to do some of these fraud prevention? I think that's become a big problem in a lot of companies. So at scale, I think we're able to dump a lot of billions of transactions, historical transactions, and have some identify some patterns around the data to be able to in real time detect, hey, is this transaction a fraud, and how do we actually prevent them from happening, and also increase the payment success rates as they happen, right? This is material, I think, when you're looking at like B2C companies at scale. I think point reduction in some of these fraud means millions of dollars. So, and you can apply that to some of the compliance use cases, like call it audit, and we spoke about a lot of compliance around all this systems, data, documents. I think ensuring like vendor compliance is there, or even system access. A lot of things that used to have like just automation and tools can now be leveraging AI to ensure reducing audit cost as well, right? Just internal audit, prep for audit is a big problem. I think the amount of time and effort that goes into prep for audit can be significantly reduced, if not the external audit fees. But I think there's a lot of outcomes we can do internally with it.
Yeah, we should do this, by the way, more often. This is like so much fun, like talking through these use cases.
So many things we are seeing on daily basis.
Yeah. So one really cool thing that we've seen is like, and to your point about like fraud prevention and like identification of outliers. So like historically, right, like you can use some machine learning to do that, but you would have to have huge amounts of data. And like basically say, what are the variances you see? And then you would have somebody who has to look at it and say, okay, we consider a non-standard transaction if it's like above a certain threshold. And so on. The really cool thing about large language models is that they can also, because programming languages are languages as well, so they can generate code. And so one of the use cases that we've seen that our customers are using Klarity for is they're looking for outliers. They just ask our, like we call it AI supercalculator. They just ask like, hey, are there any outliers? You don't have to say, is like the way you identify an outlier is if if it's above, or like use box plot analysis or use certain intervals or anything. You just say, are there any outliers? And it writes code and custom script like several times, and it kind of like figures out, and it's like, oh yeah, here's one transaction that's way above or way below, or there are other characteristics that says like, hey, there's something strange going on. So there's no pre-training needed. So I think it's just like, I guess it's like what we're trying to convey is like the opportunity there, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. Both like really small ones or like seemingly small ones, like, hey, can we match all these bill to addresses between like POs in a system, all the way to these like, can we monitor fraud at a scale of $10 billion?
Excuse me. I think if we pivot from that, right, I think what's more important for maybe some management reporting and people who are looking at not necessarily the transactional level information, what we have come across is importance of all this forecasting, predictability of information. And you can apply forecasting to a lot of data, right? Could be revenue forecasting, cash flow forecasting, or even looking at transaction and saying consumption has become a big problem now. Companies who are moving into consumption-based business models are not able to predict, hey,
Yeah.
What is my usage pattern? What should I be anticipating? So there's just a lot of those that can naturally happen with AI, and we are applying some of these on our day-to-day use cases for helping our customers do it. But I think forecasting and predictability is evolved much at a more accurate and scale compared to what was possible a few years back. Yeah.
No, and that's
Yeah.
really exciting, right? Or even just like doing something as necessary as like SSP analysis, right? You can crunch so much more data,
That's right.
so much more easily, so much more quickly, and you're gonna get a better SSP ranges.
You're
right?
calling out our roadmap. We are not supposed to.
Oh,
I think we are absolutely looking at ways and means to
Yeah.
automate some of those.
no, there's a lot of really exciting things. I think the to me it's like one of the things that we're trying to do internally at the company, right? And this is not just for accounting, this is for everybody, is to have this like AI first mindset of like, how can AI help me in this situation, right? Is it like, do I need like a simple tool, right? So for example, a lot of our folks use an email client called Superhuman that has GPT embedded in it, and so it helps you respond faster, right? It helps you create the first draft of the email. If you look at that, like all these marginal gains, if you look at the scale of an entire company, if you just like save 0.5% or 1% of everybody's time, the compounding efficiency gains that you get even on like over a year, it's incredible. And so I think to me the key thing is like, if you adopt a lot of AI across the board, you basically become much more competitive because you're so much more efficient. You have folks with higher job satisfactions, right? Because they don't have to do the frustrating, boring work. You can allocate a lot of the capital that you save through all of these efforts. You can allocate it to better product. You can allocate it to more sales. You can allocate it. You can buy back your stock to increase the shipper. Whatever you want with it. But basically, it's like on a high level for companies, it allows you to be to perform much more advanced capital allocation because of all the efficiency and kind of like qualitative gains across the board.
Yeah. I think that's I think it points down to one of my last use cases, which I feel is most impactful and exciting, is around, hey, how we experience applications, how we navigate them, how we actually get outcomes done is fundamentally changing with what's possible now, right? So let's say you mentioned it as a co-pilot. So let's say we have an accountant or finance co-pilot that has all access to structured, unstructured data connected to your applications and actually is able to respond to your questions around all of your data, or even take actions for you. You never need to do the 10-click into an application to get something done. You can just perform an action by instructing something in a natural language, and it's like a knowledge worker sitting by your side, continuously getting things done for you, and also delivering this real-time insights of what you should be doing. And especially in companies where data is at scale, it just isn't humanly possible to do some of those things. I think this is going to be a huge differentiator in terms of increasing productivity, getting outcomes done, and getting these knowledge workers in the hands of finance and accounting resources. So that's I think that's coming. I think somebody's building. It's going to be massively adopted. Huge value. And just like think of this like a Microsoft 365 that just sits along all your things that you do with Microsoft. How do we actually have a finance coworker along with you that's helping you get your things done? So
yeah, absolutely. I would just say maybe this could be the last point on this topic, and which is the way to think about like where AI is valuable in terms of like deploying in practical world is like you need to have your AI where your data is, right? What you don't want is like having a tool or having a system or whatever that is where your data isn't, or where it's hard to get the data into. If you're in that situation, then that's never going to be like very easy to use. Like the whole thing about AI is it needs to be close to your data. And so, it's paramount that you always think about like your roadmap and deploying your AI with where most of your data, where most of your data issues, for example, are located, so you can actually do something with it. I think this is going to be a challenge for a lot of specifically like FP&A tools that I always think about that don't have the data already, right? It's like if it's a new FP&A tool, and it's like you have to figure out how to get the data into it, how do you structure the data hierarchy, and so on. To me, that's always like a really big challenge.
And it goes back to going back to the original point around access to data that's accurate and complete, right? It's very important to do any of these use cases that we spoke about. I think it's very important that data is available, accurate, and complete for AI to be delivering these outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you're working very closely with a lot of companies adopting it, right? So what is your view of how mature are these companies and their adoption journey? What are you seeing? And
it ranges. It ranges massively. I think it's not surprising. So obviously we work with a lot of tech companies, and I believe a lot of folks on this webinar today are from tech companies as well. I think it's like we kind of see three tiers, very broadly speaking. We see the early adopters, and there's a lot of these early adopters who already have some kind of an AI component in their product for a long time, like the CrowdStrikes and the Cloudflares of the world, right? It's like, yes, we've been an AI company for a decade. You know, it might have been different generation, and the way we've been using AIs for cybersecurity or for infrastructure and things like that. But really, it's like we're at the forefront of that, and they're trying to permeate AI as much as possible across the entire business. Doesn't matter if it's accounting or product or sales, because I think all of these companies innately understand how big of a deal this is. And if you don't look at the horizon of 1 week or 1 month, you look at 5 years from now. If you're running your business 25% more efficiently than your closest competitor, then your closest competitor doesn't stand a chance. So I think that's kind of like one bucket. The biggest bucket, kind of like in the middle, is somebody who already has a GenAI initiative in some way, shape, or form, right? Oftentimes there's some kind of a steering committee, or the IT team has some kind of this is how we're going to think about the project, how we're going to prioritize, and there's some kind of budget allocated to it. A lot of this is kind of like in this like done from like a POC mindset, or like we're going to test something out and see what happens, and then over time. I think it's like it's a little bit of a I'm obviously biased, but I think the problem with this is you really want to kind of make the leap and jump into AI, and you might want to be very careful about like certain areas, like where, for example, something is automatically interacting with your customers, right? That's probably an area where you want to be extremely careful. But a lot of like internal operations and things like that, it's usually like the companies that have like the bigger mandate or the bigger kind of pushes, like, okay, we need to automate, let's do this, that see disproportionately better results than companies that are like, oh, let's try this and see where this goes. And we've seen this with internal projects as well. It's like whenever we were like, let's just try it out, you never like build the rigor into it, and you never like make the push, and then it's like the results are lukewarm. Versus we've seen a lot of situations where we're like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna be reporting on this weekly or monthly, and then we usually see those kind of like much better results. And I think that the third bucket are the companies that are, truthfully be told, I think, in trouble. And again, like I don't think we're gonna see the earnings calls this year and so on, but I think like 5 years from now, all of these different things compound, and I think there are companies that are even just like don't have any initiative yet. They're not thinking about how do we adopt AI. They're like, oh, we're thinking about considering that we're gonna adopt something in 2026. And if you think about the number, let's say that each team has 3 to 5 initiatives every year. For most companies, unless you're talking about really large companies, if you get 25 initiatives across the company done this year, and then another 25, then by the time that company has the first 20, you're already going to have 50 going. And I think that's there's going to be a lot of winners and there's going to be a lot of losers when we look at like a 3 to 5 year horizon.
I think hopefully our audience are in the first or second bucket.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I saw the names from the guest list.
So they're all in the first category.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think
I would actually. This is an interesting. Now I think about it. It's like if I would ever be like switching a company, I would ask them like, what's their AI strategy? Because it's like if I'm an employee somewhere and I'm thinking it's like, okay, I'm gonna get my equity vested in 4 years. Like the stock price is gonna be determined by how efficient and how competitive the company is by then, and so I would want to actually understand like how seriously
their AI strategy and what. Okay, makes sense.
So here's a top tip. So maybe one last thing, Karthik, before we go into Q&A is, what do you think about like, are there any common pitfalls that you see in implementing AI or GenAI specifically?
I think in few areas, I think as we run products, I think even when we are building things, I think it was important for us to focus on security building, ensuring privacy and security was our topmost importance. But it took us some time to come up with the right AI policy. Say what are we actually looking for? Is it ethical in nature? Is this accuracy? What's more important? Because we all understand the models are evolving so much, so fast, and I think with every iteration, you really can't predict the outcome. So you got to be building some testing agents and in parallel to ensure what your solutions are providing are accurate to our customers, right? So there's just ensuring security and privacy, accuracy in anything you build. It's more important. In solutions, I don't know if everybody takes that mindset first, and if they find out later, we have heard all these public stories around some companies putting data outside, getting stuff done. So focusing on that as a first principle. And also ensuring, see, AI is exciting. A lot of people want to get projects done, but ensuring doing a few initiatives and maybe even with a smaller team, making sure that these initiatives are giving the outcomes that the teams are wanting, because not maybe just because the solution works for somebody doesn't mean it will work for everyone. So being able to narrow down the focus and, like you said, hey, enforce that focus and have a cadence that's actually ensuring these AI projects are successful is very important. I think we have seen few companies and even initiatives internally that if you haven't executed this, we just end up failing later. So I'm sure you're seeing some at customers that you're engaging as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a little bit of a nuance on the InfoSec piece. I think the way we kind of see it is like data security. This behaves like another piece of cloud infrastructure, right? Like there's nothing fundamentally new about the fact that like you're calling an AI API somewhere versus like a non-AI API somewhere else. And so we feel like the best practices from building enterprise grade, security into your application are basically identical. And when I say basically, I mean identical. For the privacy side, that's where all the fun stuff comes, right? It's like, so what can your vendor do with your data? Can they train models on it? Can they use it for QC? Can they fine tune? What can they do actually with your data? And there's no consensus on this, and it also depends use case by use case. I think generally speaking, what we're finding is like there's no need to train models anymore for the most part, like unless you have like a really niche use case with like a really unique data set. But for all of the like compliance, operational, accounting, legal, all of those different functions, we generally see that a lot of the existing models, if you have the right like system architecture around it, and if you think about like how do you productize it, actually perform extremely well. And there's not that much need to actually train data. And so I think train models on your data. And so I think that's like the key consideration really to always think about.
Yeah. I think it's just when it comes to what LLMs are using, open source versus OpenAI, and what level of access. It's just having the right knowledge to ensure the privacy is taken care. It's very, very important. I think obviously as you engage with application providers, I think this is going to be top of mind for companies to ensure you're partnering with firms that have that that as a focus as well.
Yeah, 100%. And so we are at 11:46 a.m. here in California, which means
Time
it's
flies by.
question and answer time. So there's a little button, by the way, for everybody, Q&A, where you can submit your questions, and then we're gonna go through them. So we have, the first one is from Alpa. Can you please comment on use cases within tech companies in accounting and FP&A? So maybe I can start start on the accounting side. So what we see most commonly is, especially like on the order to revenue cycle, we see three use cases: are order management, which typically means I have a signed quote or order with a customer. I'm checking it against my CPQ data. I have some kind of a SOX control or internal control if I'm not a public company, where I need to check that all the data that I have in my CRM or in my CPQ system is correct based on the document. So that's number one use case. Number two use case is on the billing side. So especially for companies that receive a lot of purchase orders from their customers, what they want to do is they want to match the PO to the quote or the quote data in their system to make sure that the customer send them the right PO. Because you want to avoid a situation where, let's say you have net 60, right? You invoice the customer, your invoice is sitting with the customer for 60 days, and then somebody says, oh, it's not matching the PO, and then you say, no, but like the actual contract, the quote that you signed has this, and that they need to issue a new PO, and you're waiting 6 months for your cash. And so the ability to read, extract data from a PO and automatically match it to either the quote document or the quote data in a system is a very popular use case. And then the final use case that we see on the order management side is a lot of like 606 compliance, or 606 assurance, I should say. Basically making sure that all of the contracts that you're signing with your customers, all the non-standard terms that actually impact the way you recognize revenue from that specific deal are actually picked up and documented appropriately, right? So the identification is like, hey, here's a non-standard termination of some sorts, or here's an option to purchase, or here's variable consideration. So the identification of that and then the proper documentation are very popular use cases for tech companies in accounting.
Yeah, I think maybe since you touched accounting, maybe FP&A, at least what I've seen is a lot of these next-gen FP&A tools and solutions out there have incorporated AI significantly into their platform. So they're able to kind of help you build these plans, like let's say forecasting versus actuals, automatically rather than being it rule-based. So solutions out there, including, let's say you have planned around some headcounts, and if you're not actually hiring as per the plan, they're able to then provide you insights and help you change. This is very critical as you're building a business and as you're seeing progress and trends. How do I actually act on the data more real time and change my business trends rather than waiting for a month end or sometimes quarter end, year end to decide what happened and then make decisions on it. So a lot of that is getting incorporated into these platforms, and I see a distinct advantage between these next gen solutions that have incorporated this to traditional tools that haven't. So
yeah, no, thanks so much for the question, Alpa. Hopefully we answered it. If not, feel free to follow up over email, and we're happy to get into detail. So the next question is from Jay. So Jay says, where do you draw a line where we can do it using regular systems versus extensions versus AI? So from my perspective, or at least like a lot of the stuff that we do, and this is only telling part of the story, so just like putting out there, usually the best way to start is to identifying where is your manual work happening around your systems. Usually that means I have a team or at least a couple of folks that are doing some kind of transactional work, either onshore or offshore, and they're doing kind of like highly repetitive stuff. If you have a team, despite that being a small team, it usually means that it cannot easily be done with the existing systems. If it's like a part-time job for a few people, then it usually just means like, okay, this might be a system configuration or implementation issue, and it makes sense to just like invest in aligning those systems better. And so that's the kind of that's the key differentiator and how to think about it from my perspective. What would you say, Karthik?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I think it's, I would say it's very, Jay, it's very much depending on use cases, right? I think I think when we were evaluating, hey, should I just have typical system automate some of these processes versus leveraging AI? We did a ton of POCs around, hey, some zero shot experiments before we spend a lot of time on some of these use cases. Exploring what's possible with some of these LLMs and APIs, and applying our use cases against it, which were even to pick which problems to solve through AI or not. And we have many times determined, hey, what we have today is far better and good for that particular use case when it's particularly some of those situations occur. And there have been some situations where LLMs were far better, and we didn't anticipate that will deliver those outcomes. So it is very use case specific, and you got to probably we have an AI labs team that's just experimenting these things before we invest a lot more time and resources on picking which projects are right. So it's very much company to use case driven specific.
Well, 100%. Jay, hopefully we answered your question as well. The next question is from Arvind. Actually, we have two questions. So this is regarding our statement, place your GenAI, where's your data? So question number one, were you referring to place GenAI at large data warehouses like Tableau, OBIE? Question number two, what's your take on GenAI at individual applications, Coupa, S-Base, EDM, homegrown transaction-based systems? Do you want to get started?
I'm not very familiar with the Coupa, specific solutions and what they're doing. Let me take a look at it.
Coupa is like 3 miles from here, so maybe we should just go over and ask what they think.
Yeah, I think definitely for leveraging AI, right? I think to some extent you're dependent on what the solution providers do on their own, because each one of the applications are going to invest and launch capabilities around it. But if I were a company, I think what these individual solutions provide may not be sufficient for me to get the maximum benefit of GenAI. So I think building solutions on top of, or either building solutions in-house or leveraging applications that are actually connecting to all these applications and to your warehouse, and being able to provide automation, insights and actions on top of that data is very powerful. So you can't just be relying on these software vendors to solve all of the potential possibilities and outcomes from GenAI. That would be how we would look at it.
Yeah, I agree with Karthik. I think it's like the 2 points that I would make is, so the first one is like, what I mean by place your AI where your data is. Some of it might be with existing, but like I would optimize for if you're deploying new solutions that integrate very easily or can access the data very easily, right? So it might not be something from an existing vendor, it might be a new company that comes in, but they have an easy way to access the data, right? So for example, we have a Salesforce integration out of the box, or we have a Zora integration, right? And so it's like, it's easy to get data into Klarity, and then it's easy to apply AI on that. And I think that the second point that I would make is, I think this is very similar to the smartphone moment, in the sense that vast majority of the like really life-changing applications didn't come through the really huge players, right? It's like, we're not using TomTom navigation on our iPhones, we're using Google Maps. Right, and versus like, and I think it's like, and it's nimble companies, and it's the companies that are like heavily focused, right, like that actually like provide these completely new experiences, right? Like Karthik's point about like, hey, how can we leverage AI to provide you with a much better SSP analysis, right? Like those are the really like game-changing ideas, and the history tells us that those usually don't come from the really big, huge, like multi-billion-dollar companies. But that's just like an opinion. Okay, Sagar, for leveraging AI, I assume we're dependent on SaaS-based applications like NetSuite, Zora, that we're using. Can we do anything outside of these apps? If yes, how? Not sure if I understand the question super well.
I think I was just answering to that before. I was just seeing this question. I think there's a definite possibility, right? I think being able to bring this data, I'm sure all of us have some sort of data warehouse, data like in-house, connecting and bringing data from all these applications and being able to build solutions again, same thing, right? Identify the use case, all the use cases of everything we spoke, pick use cases that we think, hey, we want to own and automate this internally. But for that, you got to be bringing data from all these applications to do. So happy to kind of share some of those use cases that we spoke during this webinar offline, Sagar, if we need, but definitely I think there is opportunity for internal teams to build on top of it.
Yeah, I agree. I would say one last thing is the one thing, I don't know if part of this question was like the method of deployment as well, but generally speaking, all of this stuff runs in the cloud. Like nobody pretty much has the like compute power on-prem to be able to do this. There's some exceptions like the big banks and so on, but generally speaking, for 99% of all companies, this needs to be cloud-based, because if you're looking at a 400 billion parameter plus model, running that on existing hardware is like on your on-prem hardware is going to be taking days to get the results. Sagar, hopefully we answered your question. Christine Stebbins, can AI support automation on AP data entry and verification of coding accuracy? Yes, and if you email me, I can show you exactly how. But absolutely, it can help here.
And that's an area around AP. I think there's a lot of tools providing some automation. Yeah, I think.
I just added. I hope you don't mind, since I am not sure you're very interested in AP
no, definitely not.
use cases, but I added my email, Christine, and if you're interested, I'm happy to share. Pete Dillon, can you describe the nature and timing by which existing accounting AI systems are being retrained or newly issued ASCs, ASUs, Big Four guidance memos, and so on? The way to think about a lot of these large language models is like for you to, for example, access a new guidance or new Big Four memo, you don't actually need to retrain the LLM itself. It's more about how do you productize the LLM. So for example, you can do these things like, you can basically on the fly retrieve this context, right? So if there's a new memo issued, basically put it, this is grossly simplified, but you basically have the large language model, you have a end user interface, and then on the back end is like, you have all these things, like all these memos and ASCs and whatnot, like all of your knowledge base, right? And you can architect the product in a way where somebody asks a question, you're not going to get the response from the LLM itself in terms of what it has been trained on, because it's just going to give you a statistically correct representation. What you actually want is like, you want the LLM to go and read the memo that you are referring to. You can ask the question, figures out, okay, I need to look at this memo, and then it transforms the content into, for example, bullet points if you ask for bullet points. And so it's more about the specific product that you're using rather than the large language model that you're using and how the product is built. I think one thing to note maybe is like large language models are just like an infrastructure layer. Like even when you're using ChatGPT or Google Bard or one of these, you're actually not directly like interacting with the LLM. There's a lot of product built on top of the large language model itself to be able to, so it's like a useful product for the end user. And so, you can of course directly interact with an LLM through API calls, but that's a very, very different experience than actually using a product.
Well, I think to your question on which specific system and how current these data points are, I think we don't have accurate clarity into which accounting systems have all of the latest solutions around it. But everything you've asked there, Pete, is our best use cases on how AI can help. I think definitely some of the solutions are going to get updated, stay current, help you prepare, review a lot of this from within their application interfaces.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of questions here, but maybe we just quickly run through these. Shouldn't companies be focused on AI solutions with their existing providers, Microsoft D365, Coupa, and so on, versus looking for a new AI vendor? Well, it depends if they can solve what you're looking for, right? If Coupa is solving the thing that you're looking for, the problem statement, then you should probably not look for a new vendor. If you have a problem statement that none of your existing vendors are solving, you should probably look for a new vendor. I don't think there's anything specific relating to
No, absolutely, yeah.
Ash, how would I deploy a pre-trained model on my enterprise data without going beyond my enterprise boundaries, but rather bringing in the pre-trained LLM? So I'm not sure if this is a question about like kind of data privacy and data security. It depends, like if you're using any cloud providers already, if you have a private cloud or public cloud internally, and what do you consider your enterprise boundaries? What we see is like, we see very few companies, and really it comes down to like the Bank of Americas and so on, that still have everything kind of on-prem in their own cloud and their own data centers. We don't really see that much anymore. Most companies have to rely on a bunch of different SaaS applications that are running on public cloud, and it's about their infosec posture.
Yeah, this is where I think that your AI policies inside companies and comes into place. But absolutely, I think you should be able to leverage some of the pre-trained models, not having to retrain, because that's the most expensive part. That's what is available, and ensure you just host it internally. Your data doesn't go out, and leverage. Run these models in your platform instead of calling public APIs. You just run these pre-trained models internally, which should give you that outcome.
One thing just to note, maybe, and this is something pretty important, is what we found is a lot of the open source models are running extremely inefficiently, and so while the model is free, the actual cost of running that model, running the inference, is significantly higher than a lot of the like API, like model providers behind the API. So it's just something to consider. Thoughts on avoiding AI hallucinations, coming up with imaginary technical guidance and using it to conclude a position. It depends on how you productize things. So what we found is, like, if you have a constraint problem, you can build a bunch of different safeguards to catch hallucinations, and so then you prevent them from occurring, or you're able to flag them and say, hey, here's something to consider. For the completely generic use cases, or just like calling the LLM to do something, that it's pretty much impossible today. I don't know if there's...
No, I think what we do to avoid some of these hallucinations is we build some foundational model and a testing agents that always ensures quality of these outcomes. And if it's not passing certain percentage, then you basically call it out and say, I don't have an answer, rather than having your agents give wrong and inaccurate responses. So we obviously prevent some of those, and it's an ongoing effort, right? And we continuously get feedback from users of these solutions to say, hey, is it accurate? Is it giving you the right information? And continuously fine tune the models to deliver outcomes. So
completely agree. Sunil is asking, do we have successful use cases on revenue forecasting and demand forecasting leveraging AI?
We are actively working on some of those, and not on the demand side. We are focusing on the revenue side, but we are seeing some definitely some good results on those, because we are running these models across our customer base and fine tuning it to individual customers. So there is just a lot of variables we apply, and we are seeing some good, very good accuracy on these results.
Okay, thank you. Do companies leveraging AI to automate invoice upload into payment portals? The growing number of payment portals is a very soul-crushing issue. Is this I'm not sure if this is an AR or AP question. If you mean AR, like in the sense that you have a lot of different customers and they're using different portals, and you need to send them an invoice in a different way. I don't think there's a good solution today, because it's what you're not asking, like you're not asking to do like AI extraction or AI data manipulation. It's like, can you go to a website, log in somewhere? Maybe there's some RPA that can help with this. I'm not sure.
I definitely, it's an RPA. This seems like an RPA automation.
But it's not something that we've seen. So unfortunately here, I don't think we can. Right, but I don't think that this is a place where AI specifically could help. SM is asking, can Klarity analyze contracts, identify key terms, and automatically fill in revenue lines with recognition rules in a spreadsheet based on performance obligations? A combination of Klarity and Zora Revenue can. We can do the contract analyzing. We can identify the key terms. We can push all of the data, and then Zora Revenue is the best in class to actually figure out all of your performance obligations and do your revenue waterfall and everything else. So if you're interested, we're happy to chat.
I should give both our emails now.
Yeah,
So.
we promise that both of us will come to the call. Oh, what's your email? Karthik at
Zora.
Karthik. Okay. So it's Karthik at Zora.com. It's Andrew at claritylaw.com. So, and then is there a good solution on the market currently that can read a revenue agreement, generate an ASC 606 memo? What is the typical cost for such a solution? We're a small company. So there is a solution. It's called, again, Klarity and Zora Revenue together. The small company, it depends on how small, really. It's like AI is not like very cheap today, really. So we're happy to chat and see if we can help. But generally, like a lot of AI solutions or combination of like AI and software solutions together is not the cheapest thing in the world. I think it's going to trickle down as we see compute power being cheaper and cost of inference going down. But right now, it's not it's still pretty expensive.
Yeah, I think that was the last question. I think we were intentional, at least in the beginning, not to make this a Zora Klarity kind of topic. It was more around, hey, general use cases and how we can help. But a lot of these use cases seem to revolve around what we are already solve for our customers. So that's why I think you heard a lot of Klarity and Zora. But hopefully you learned a lot about, I think, starting from what's generative AI to all the way up to some of the use cases and where it's predominantly getting leveraged in enterprises currently and how it's going to be evolving. And we'll hopefully do more of these sessions and continue to share how things are evolving and what our customers are getting benefit of.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's anything else, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us. And I think this is a hallmark of a good webinar if we're almost 10 minutes over. So thank you everybody for coming and spending more than an hour with us. And hopefully we're going to see you at one of our either real life events or the next webinar.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody.
Hey, thank you. Thanks everyone for the time.